So I now give the floor to Mr. Hillel NEUER, Director General of UN Watch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This year, we should be celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, led by Eleanor Roosevelt, the founding chair of the Commission on Human Rights. And yet, in the last month, while the Islamic Republic of Iran has embarked on a killing spree, executing, as we heard, at least 142 people, the regime was rewarded in the same time period with no less than 3 high positions at the world body. A vice president of the UN General Assembly, rapporteur of the UNGA's Committee on Disarmament and International Security, and chair of the Human Rights Council Social Forum. By granting undue recognition to the torturers and terrorists of the Islamic Republic of Iran, instead of holding them to account, the UN emboldens the perpetrators and betrays the victims. The UN betrays its own founding principles. In December, we at UN Watch, together with other supporters of human rights in Iran, were on a high. We had come here 13 years ago with former political prisoner Ahmed Batabi and human rights activist Nazanin Afshinjan on behalf of 50 Iranian human rights activists to demand a special session on human rights in Iran. Finally, in November, it happened. They created a fact-finding mission, and we will hear from them soon, in a couple of weeks, upstairs. In December, we had another victory. By an overwhelming vote of 29-8, the Islamic Republic of Iran became the first government in the history of the United Nations to be expelled from the Commission on the Status of Women. It never happened before. There was no such provision. Now, UN Watch, our organization, was the first in the world to reveal and protest the obscene election of the misogynistic mullahs to the UN's top women's rights body. A regime that beats, blinds, arrests, tortures, rapes, poisons, and kills women and girls for protesting never should have been there in the first place. Now, our expose sparked parliamentary protests and headlines worldwide. We waged a relentless campaign over 2 years. When the protests began over the death in custody of Mahsa Amini, we circulated a draft resolution for the UN to expel the regime. Finally, on December 14th, this is 7 months ago, the regime that tortures women was expelled from the UN Women's Rights Commission. But now, in the past month or so, we have witnessed a whirlwind of UN wins for the Ayatollahs that is astonishing. First, a fanatical regime won election in New York as a vice president of the UN General Assembly. This defied logic, not least because only 6 months prior, in December, the same body, the UN General Assembly, adopted a resolution, a good resolution, a strong resolution, condemning gross human rights abuses by Iran, one of only a handful of countries in the world censured by the UNGA. Iran was called out by the General Assembly for the surge in executions disproportionately applied to minorities, as well as for systemic discrimination against women and girls. The resolution expressed serious concern about the compulsory hijab law and its violent implementation by Iranian morality police. In addition, the World Parliament strongly urged Iran to cease the use of arbitrary detention, torture, and excessive force against peaceful protesters, to eliminate discrimination based on thought, religion, or belief. In the apt words of Christopher Liu, the United States ambassador on UN reform, quote, Iran cannot act as an honest broker in its role as a vice president of the General Assembly because it has shown time and time again that it does not seek to enhance global peace and security, but rather works against it. Second, the Shiite theocracy also won election as rapporteur of the UNGA's Committee on Disarmament and International Security. What this means is that later this year, we will see the spectacle of the Islamic regime representative Haidar Ali Baluchi taking the UN podium on behalf of that committee and presenting some 50 to 70 draft resolutions on issues such as nuclear proliferation, threats to international security, and terrorism, even as his regime is the perpetrator and menace on the very problems these measures are meant to address. Now, more than anything, Iran's past and ongoing breaches of nuclear agreements contradict the very essence of the Disarmament Committee's mandate. The assignment threatens to legitimize the regime's ongoing violations and discredits the UN's commitment to disarmament. Finally, the most confounding appointment of the past month is the decision to name the Islamic Republic of Iran as the chair of the Human Rights Council's Social Forum, which takes place here in November. Given the Council's own recent actions and findings, some of which we have heard, the appointment of this regime to head any post at the world's highest human rights body makes no sense. Just consider, from the Human Rights Council, November 22nd, we convened here an emergency session at the initiative of German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock to condemn Tehran's, quote, violent crackdown on peaceful protests resulting in the deaths of hundreds of people in connection with the nationwide protests following the death in custody of Gina Mahsa Amini. Second, the Council voted to create its first ever fact-finding mission on Iran, mandated to investigate abuses during the crackdown, particularly those against women and children. On May 9th, a joint statement by 19 of the Council's own human rights monitors, including the independent expert on torture, on summary executions, and also on involuntary disappearances, strongly condemned the Islamic Republic for recent executions targeting critics of the government, which they said were, quote, tantamount to arbitrary deprivation of life under international law. And yet, only a day later, on May 10th, the president of the Human Rights Council, Ambassador Václav Balek of the Czech Republic, announced his appointment of Iran as chair of the Council's upcoming Social Forum, which aims to advance human rights through science, technology, and innovation. Naturally, those of us working for human rights in Iran were outraged. The Council president claimed that he had no choice. Iran was the only candidate nominated by the Asian group of states, and he had notified in advance all of the regional groups. Why didn't any member state take action? Why didn't the president take leadership and reach out to friendly states who care about human rights in Iran and ask for help to mobilize other candidates? Why did no UN delegation in Geneva feel the moral compunction to stop this obscene appointment, which not only harms the people of Iran, but casts a shadow upon the reputation of the United Nations as a whole? As a result, in November, Ayatollah Khamenei's regime representative will be holding the gavel upstairs with UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk and other dignitaries at his side. Absurdly, a regime that stifles internet freedom, impedes access to information, uses technology such as facial recognition to repress dissent, and which just executed people for criticizing the government on social media, will be heading a forum on human rights and technology. Now, some of you may ask, why do these appointments matter? Well, they send the wrong message at the wrong time, enabling the Islamic Republic of Iran, even as it is shooting protesters in the face and raping human rights defenders in prison, to strut on the international stage here at the United Nations as a respected and influential actor. No less, the regime is able to proclaim victory to its people, witness the instant declarations in state-controlled Fars News, IRNA, and Press TV, in order to dishearten, dispirit, and demoralize dissidents. How did Iran win this UN trifecta, and what can be done? Well, inside the UN, sadly, too many delegations seek to go along to get along. In the closed world of backroom deals and geographic rotations, a bloody dictatorship, for too many, is considered every inch the equal of a liberal democracy. Democracies that pay lip service to the high principles of the UN Charter too often ignore them when making critical UN decisions. Our human rights group, UN Watch, is fighting back with a petition backed by over 85,000 signatories. We've drafted a resolution, submitted it to this session of the Human Rights Council as an NGO written statement to overturn Iran's Human Rights Council chairmanship of the Social Forum. It now requires a UN member state to to formally sponsor and introduce it. I am convinced that the mullahs can and will be removed, but it's time for UN member states to stop legitimizing murderous regimes in violation of the world body's founding principles and to begin holding the perpetrators to account. Only then will we live up to the legacy of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights adopted at the United Nations 75 years ago. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Neuer.